host, Matt Fitzgerald. Live from Dream Run Camp is brought to you by 80/20 Endurance, and it is hosted at Dream Run Camp here in beautiful Flagstaff, Arizona. My guest today is a friend and colleague. I can say this about so many of our guests. Work and professional life, just
blessed.
Yes. Yes. Ryan Whitehead of Paragon Athletics, a facility here. We'll get into this in Flagstaff. Welcome, Ryan.
Thanks so much for having me, Matt.
Right on.
Yeah.
Also here behind the camera is birthday girl. Well, her birthday was yesterday, Lauren Clement, assistant coach here at Dream Run Camp. We got a couple of triathletes who are staying at the camp right now, having the absolute time of their lives. Nod like you mean it. Yes. All right. Yeah. Loving life here at Dream Run Camp. And so Ryan and I we're co-authoring a book that is going to come out. Who knows how far in the future you're watching this, but as we sit here live, it's we're in September. It should come out, and it will come out in December. It will.
That's right here.
So we'll talk a little bit about that, but also Ryan is just a fascinating guy with a really interesting story, and so we'll delve into a little bit about that as well. How's that sound?
That sounds great to me.
Right on. And thank you for bringing beer, by the way.
You can count on me, Matt.
Yeah. It's like,
salud.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Off to a terrible start. I like to begin when I have a guest with whom I have an existing professional / personal relationship. I like to ask, how did we meet? How do we know each other?
We met at a talk that I gave. I forget the year it was.
2019.
2019.
October 2019.
There you go. You were at Rob Carr's Run Camp.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the campers opted to come hear a talk that I was giving at that time.
I think it was mandatory. We all
came. What was the title of that talk?
Pain and Performance.
What?
Yes.
Yeah. So, which happens to be the title of the book that we ended up putting together. So it's been quite a little path.
Yes. Say a little bit more about that. I mean, and you're welcome to speak for me, because I've told you about what an impact that experience had on me. So, so I mean, it wasn't that long afterward. It was, it was a little bit of a meet cute story. Just
yes, absolutely.
I want this guy's number. I also want this guy's number.
Yeah, it was like that. Just like that. So, sometimes my talks can be heavy on science, and which is just gripping to some folks, and other folks glaze over, and you were one of those folks that it happened to land on. So Matt approached me afterward, and if I remember right, I don't know if I made up this memory or not. But if I remember right, you said something to the effect of that was fascinating, something to that effect.
Yes.
And you were one of the only folks that's ever it just landed with where you went, this jibes completely with my experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't too long after that I forget if I reached out to you, if you reached out to me, but it was sort of
very mutual. Very mutual.
We were looking for each other's numbers.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and then we started compiling what has now become a book.
Yep.
Not long after that.
Yes. Pain and Performance. Subtitle escapes me because we've iterated ad nauseum on it. But it is a descriptive title, which is one of the strengths of it. One of the reasons you gave that talk, the title you gave it. Just to riff a little bit on what you said, the perspective. As a lifelong athlete and an often injured athlete, I had my share of personal experience with pain, and also I just happened to be, a dilettante, just not a scientist, but an athlete and a coach who knew more than the average bear about brain science, just because of I have an older brother who is a brain scientist. and just would feed stuff to me. And I was like very early on board with, Tim Noakes's central governor theory, and like, in as much as brain science was relevant to the endurance sports space. So like
Yeah.
that was my background. Like I had a lot of experience with pain, and I knew a little bit of something about the role, like just the role of the brain in endurance sports experience. And yeah, I just had a number of injuries over the years that none of the medical experts could fix for me.
Right.
I had completely unnecessary surgeries, completely bogus diagnoses,
Hmm.
and 3 injuries in particular had kept me out of competition for years
Right.
individually.
Right.
One of them just over a year. The longest was like more than 3 years, like in the thick of what should have been my prime as an athlete. So this stuff was very personal. And in each case, I thought, when you're hurt that long, you think this could be the end.
Right.
I might not be an athlete anymore. But each time I was able to overcome it. How? The same way the injury was caused, by running. Like running fixed a running injury. I'm like, there's a pattern here.
Right.
Like one time could be random, 2 times coincidence, 3 times something to it. And then when you did your pain and performance presentation, where you explained this, this newish biopsychosocial model of pain, and talked about just like what the science says does and doesn't work for overcoming pain and injury. It's just like everything I've experienced made sense. And like I said, I knew just enough brain science that it took a while, because I reverted a lot, and because to fully really understand like what pain really is,
Right.
and to undo, because you have to undo a lot of the learning
Which
that
is
we've
really
done.
hard.
Which was hard for me, even though we were talking every day for a while. But like, anyhow, that's me saying like why it had such a huge impact on me. And it was just like, it all makes sense now. Thank you. And let's write a book.
Right. Yeah. And honestly, I share a lot of those experiences as an athlete also. I was very frustrated with that process of trying to get help with injuries. What I would now call, how injuries are defined by the British Journal of Sports Medicine is really loose. I think it starts with a complaint. And so, yeah. So, but I had that same experience, and I was so frustrated because it would put me on the sidelines for a couple times there, right in my prime, as you say, and where I thought, wow, if I miss a year of climbing at an elite level, this is a lot of time missed.
Yes, Ryan is an elite boulderer.
Yeah,
should mention.
Yeah. So for any athlete at any stage, missing big chunks of in your lifestyle and your enjoyment and how we live,
your identity
is big.
Sucks.
Yep, it's hard, real hard. So I meet with folks weekly that come to tears because of this situation. So yeah. So we're not alone.
Yep. So it was fun because I like, all I knew about you when you gave that presentation was what you presented, and you talked a little bit about like your journey. But then when we sort of traded phone numbers and decided to like do a book, I started to learn a lot more about your biography, and like right away I'm like, this has to be the way because like the message is like, people don't know this already. Like you really have to like, like people have been taught certain things about pain and injury.
Yep.
And your message and the science that backs it up just destroys all that. So you're going to get some pushback, some skepticism, or even just some non-comprehension from people.
Yep.
And so I realized pretty quickly, like the best way to get people to like gradually sort of like for these ideas to like kind of seep into their minds, I guess, and take root would be to like just tell your story. And like, because you weren't born knowing this stuff either, you figured it out.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about how, because it all makes sense in retrospect. It's like
Yeah.
why you're so interested in pain, why you're on a mission to help athletes
Yeah.
not be sidelined by pain and injury. So have at it.
Oddly enough, this had to be pointed out to me. So I was
Beyond obvious.
yeah, so I'm real smart in some ways. So I was born the son of a racehorse jockey, and racing is so incredibly dangerous that the average career span, I think, is somewhere around 9 months, because people realize I'm going to die this way, or I'm going to be hurt so often,
Or they do die this way.
or they do die that way. Yeah. And so it was just in my face constantly as a kid growing up, and I didn't. It was so in my face, and so in our conversation, injuries and managing health and nutrition, managing the health of the horses, managing the health of my dad, and our income was uh, dependent on my dad's health. So we lived on that. And it was discussed over dinner, and it was, and I didn't even realize like how built in it was to everything till years down the road. And then as I became an athlete, a lifelong athlete, I thought there was a clear way to like diagnose pain and stay healthy. And so wanting to do that for other athletes, and myself included, I just sort of launched into obsessing in a way that was maybe not even healthy at some points in my life. So yeah, I definitely obsessed to an extent. I remember getting done with work at a certain point in my career that I would go into the restroom and sit down beside the toilet at the end of the workday, because I felt sick, and I realized it was just fatigue. But it took me about 2 months to realize that. No, I thought I had something, but it ended up that I was just like so in the thick of it, and so obsessed that I was doing too much. So thankfully, I'm not at that place now. Actually, COVID surprisingly helped with that. So we got to zoom out a little bit and like reclaim some of our lives. So my family. So yeah, it ended up being a good thing. So
Can you just briefly give like a quick litany of some of the injuries your father experienced? So, like, he wasn't just a professional racehorse jockey; he's in the Hall of Fame.
yeah,
And like you said, the average career lasts 9 months. His career lasted 34 years.
right at 35 years. Yep.
35 years. So,
yeah, and he won nearly 4,000 races.
oh,
Yeah. So
just had a few scrapes along the way, right?
yeah, just had his jaw wired shut a couple times. He was in for a broken neck. And when they were looking at that, they said, "Well, you must have broken your back too at some point." And he said, "Well, I didn't know about that." He had broken. He's broken so many things. When he was a kid, the family doctor they went to told the family, I think, just to my granddad would have my dad race because he was so little, but he got hurt so many times. I think the doctor told my granddad if he broke his arm again, they were going to have to talk about amputation. And I think it was just to scare his parents, obviously, but it didn't scare him. My dad just moved. So
We didn't know the doctor.
at 13. Yeah.
Wrong answer.
Yeah. So he has had, and that was just, it was constant. Like one of the chair at the end of our table, at the end of our dinner table, was all scarred up because he wore a halo, one of those halos that holds your head and your neck, and it goes down to below the rib cage. And so that chair was just all beat up from him like moving around and the halo in it. So, but that's an indelible thing. Those are the things that you don't realize how much of an impression that's leaving
Sure,
on you,
yeah.
but it is.
Seems normal when you're a kid,
It
right?
it's normal.
It is normal.
Yeah. It's normal for your dad to duct tape his toes on. Yeah. So yeah, that was just how I was brought up. No, so that was seeing hoof prints, on my dad in the hospital. So it was just kind of a normal thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. So that was part of how I've come to where I've come
Yep.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's no accident.
No.
A lot of accidents, but no accident.
Many accidents.
Yeah. So one of the things we get into in the book we've written together is this idea that pain obviously pre-existed the medicalization of pain.
Mhm.
And so your dad, it's not to say that he managed pain and injury optimally,
Right.
but he did it the way it had always been done.
Mhm.
And people aren't idiots, right? It's just like, we do the best we can. Like we figure out,
Mhm.
and when you became an athlete, and I could think are probably a lot like your dad, you take after him in certain ways, like that sort of
Mhm.
like high tolerance, like, just like the mission justifies the suffering
Mhm.
required. And pain indifference, a term I learned from you.
Yeah.
So like when you get into it, you're taking out, you're like a chip off the old block, and you're getting hurt, you're experiencing pain, but you're just sort of like finding your own way through it, like
Mhm.
with minimal reliance on experts, outside experts, versus like diagnosis, treatment. And it worked pretty well, not perfectly, but well. And then you get further along, and you go down like a professional path of like trying to serve athletes who get injuries or experience pain.
Yep.
And then you start getting indoctrinated into this modern medical model of pain,
Yeah.
which is like really kind of like, I mean, you don't want to like demonize it. Like
Right.
there's a lot of like real knowledge and learning infused in it, but it's also,
And well-meaning people.
yeah, it's also kind of a step back on a practical level. It's just like, no, pain is pain.
Yeah.
It's like when you're hungry, you eat.
Yeah.
When you're hurt, you take a step back.
Yep.
When you're tired, you go to bed.
Yep.
And then suddenly, but it's just like suddenly it's like pain is unthinkable, and like you must
Uh-huh.
eradicate it at all costs, and something's wrong with your body if you
Right.
experience pain.
You're sick.
Yeah. So can you talk a little, because this is where we get into the real meat of it. It's just like what pain is, and how pain is best managed versus like the paradigm we're stuck in now, like where what athletes think pain is, and what athletes think they have to do to manage and deal with pain.
Yeah. So one of the things I really push back strongly on is diagnosis, because I think it's just, especially the way diagnosis kind of, it's a linear idea, linear thinking of pain, and pain is not linear. It is so multifactorial, and so complex. To reduce it to a single thing is just fallacious, in all respects. So, in Engel, with the biopsychosocial, biopsychosocial is kind of new again, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
It's been, in discussed for years and years and years, and it is kind of, it's sort of, it's a little bit like Jeet Kune Do, like how Bruce Lee talked
Oh, here
about.
we go with the Bruce Lee. I knew. I can't believe we got 17 minutes into this conversation without a Bruce Lee reference.
Where it's not it's not like a real system. It's a constantly evolving system, and when we try to like systemize it, it doesn't work very well. So you just have to know that each person you work with is an individual, and that's how to start it. So, but with diagnosis and the pathoanatomy model that we've used for years, like people think that they're sick when they have pain, when really it's a perfectly normal experience that happens to all of us that we live with, like hunger. But we all experience hunger a little differently. We all know that, and so some people, like my wife, actually gets a little queasy when she gets hungry. And it's one of those things that we all experience. It's a subjective experience. It's not an objective thing that can be looked at. Um, so we've just come at this in such a flawed way that it has caused a lot of problems. And you can see it, like we have an opioid epidemic. It very likely contributed to that, that pain just can't be present in your life at all, So yeah, that's a side note, but yeah, so it's become my mission to sort of help people understand, including athletes, that it doesn't mean you're sick, and it can be managed in many ways, not just through your anatomy. It can be managed through your sleep. It can be managed through your relationships. It can be managed through so many other things, that we didn't realize that has an impact on how your tendons feel. So, but it has an impact on how your tendons feel.
Right.
So yeah, when you get a diagnosis of a tendinopathy or any other sort of diagnosis, we just place the blame on that structure.
Right.
And that's just not how it works at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If your knee hurts, your knee's the problem.
Yeah. If your knee hurts, you might need to sleep better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's be empathetic to the athletes in the room and the athletes listening to this live or in the future. So because it is a universal experience. So you're training and you experience pain, and maybe like more than the usual pain.
Right.
And so the athlete assumes first of all, this is the chain of events because I went through it many times. Like, this hurts, something's wrong, I'm probably injured. I should call a doctor. The doctor's right. When the doctor says, I have an injury, I do.
Yeah.
When
a complaint.
Yes, a complaint. And so when the doctor makes me feel dependent on him or her to recover, he or she is right. I am dependent. I can't do it myself. And any sort of heroic treatments that are prescribed are evidence-based and efficacious. And also, somewhere in here, if I'm referred to a physical therapist, I'm going to learn that the reason I'm injured, that my pain equals injury, is that my biomechanics are flawed. And my biomechanics are flawed because of structural imbalances in my body. So that whole chain of events, how much of that is true?
Oh, geez. Your complaint is true. We can stop there.
It's true that you feel pain.
Yeah, it's true that you're having a rough patch. So yeah, and sometimes you have to say, sure, there are such things as stress fractures, things of that nature, but by and large, the majority of our pain experiences aren't things like that. So this is another. I thought of this yesterday. I was working with a climber who ruptured her biceps. So she ruptured her biceps. She is a elite climber. She's been a pro climber for many years, and so we were talking, and she said, "But at least my right one matches my left one now." And I said, "When did you do your left one?" She goes, "I don't know." And so pain just isn't a reflection of the state of your tissue. It is way fuzzier than that. So she had no recollection of ever rupturing her left bicep. Somebody pointed it out to her at one point. Then 2 weeks ago, she ruptured her right biceps with a slight amount of, I don't even think she called it pain, actually. She just had some concern. So it just isn't a one-to-one ratio of damage equals pain. It rarely is representative of each other. So yeah, so that is the case that we end up, we go to see somebody, a doctor, a well-meaning doctor in most cases, because something hurts. But sadly, pain education is a very small amount of the education that a doctor has. So, and I don't know if this is still the case, but at one point in the PT world, I think it was 1.5 hours of pain education is what they got. So to even, and that's like actual hours, not credit hours. So yeah, that's kind of heartbreaking to me, because that's the majority of the reason somebody goes to seek help, is because something hurts. So, and then when you go down the rabbit hole of your imbalances and your, all of those things, your breathing and the other crazy things, just ends up going deeper and deeper and deeper until feel like you're on an island. You've reduced your activities, you've reduced your relationships, and all of a sudden you're just trying to fix yourself in the least likely route.
Yeah, so the consequences can be huge. And again, I speak from personal experience where that dependency matters. Like you taught me the term pain self-efficacy. It's like when you feel empowered to figure it out, it's not that like getting help isn't allowed,
right?
But when you feel like I can do something about this, outcomes are better. Like there's science showing this. And when you go to see a doctor, pain self-efficacy predictably goes down. It's like, I can't do this myself. I am in the hands of this expert. I don't understand the words they're saying, but I'm just going to do. So like that dependency, that reduction in self-efficacy, it has an effect. Like you're going to feel more pain longer. You're going to be more restricted in your activities longer. You're going to be out. It's just going to, the whole thing is going to take longer. Then the diagnosis problem.
Right.
Most of these diagnoses, I mean, you showed me the science, are bullshit. Not for like traumatic injuries. Like you literally broke your ankle. I'm sorry for those of you, Lauren behind the camera. You broke your ankle in the middle of a 10K race. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's a broken ankle.
Yeah.
That's an injury.
That's traumatic.
Yes. Yeah. But for like the overused types of things, the slow onset types of stuff, like the diagnoses are just baloney for the most part. And even when they're valid or defensible, they don't accomplish anything. No. They can enhance that feeling of powerlessness. It's like, oh, I have a thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, all of this whole system is like, it's highly consequential. It's not, it's like a real problem. Like if you're an athlete who just wants to be slowed down as little as possible by pain, like the whole paradigm we're caught up in is like kind of your enemy. And like, again, like sadly, I experienced this personally, like a surgery, went to a doctor.
Yeah.
It's like, you have chondromalacia.
Yeah.
You need surgery. Had surgery. Recovered from the surgery. Started running again. Pain came back.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Sweet.
Yeah. No, the pain did go away. How did it go away? Like I just bootstrapped my way through it. I'm like, okay, if it hurts too much, I'm not going to run. But I'm a runner.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try again. And then it's like a dance, like a relationship you have with your pain.
Yep.
Like.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and when I work with folks that are stuck or whatnot, we build the program together. Like it's literally, the discussion is collaborative. It is not, I am the authority on this, and you are just going to do this prescription. It is, this is your process, and we're going to just build it together. I'll share some of the things that I think. So instead of me knowing the way, because there's not a way.
Right.
Back to Bruce Lee.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
You find answers, you don't supply
yeah,
ready-made at hand answers.
yeah. We're all our own little person. So yeah, and what works for one person might make another person feel terrible. So you just kind of have to build your program together and figure out the recipe. Is kind of how I say it. It's science. Like we know that like chemistry is to cooking. That's science. But we all have like a little. I like cayenne. Not everybody likes cayenne. So some people like it saltier, and so you
Lauren does not like cayenne.
so with your recipe, we would have to change things a little bit, so dial it back a little bit, meaning whatever your activities are, not an actual eating recipe, but your training, your exercises, those other lifestyle influences. um, we have to adjust all of those ingredients, and work with them, and then work from there as how you respond to whatever the recipe was for those 10 days or so, and adjust from there. But it's dynamic, and that's fun, because then you start people getting involved, and they're getting better and feeling better, which is awesome. Yeah, that's how I feel like it should be. I don't bring any magic. um, I am purely facilitating what they have on board, like, and honestly, like, they're facilitating, I'm just kind of aiding it a bit, so but all the magic is with that person that is recovering, getting better and getting stronger. They bring all that to the table. That's all that's being used at that time. So that's why, like, cupping and dry needling and all those things just don't bring much to the table.
Yeah.
Literally. So yeah, the treatment table.
Mhm.
um yeah, if the athlete knows that they're bringing everything that's necessary,
Right.
it's helpful.
Yeah. I mean, they they feel supported, but they also feel empowered or
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah.
So
Um, so like, I know that you like, I mean, you're all about substance, less about style. But you've you've compromised enough to at least come up with a name for your approach,
yeah, yeah,
training as treatment,
yeah,
which I love. And that was going, we flirted with that being the title of
yep,
our book, because that, it's a perfectly suitable name for
yep.
your methodology. So could you kind of unpack what's behind those words, like, just kind of describe like what goes on at Paragon
Yeah,
Athletics?
yeah. So I like for people to realize that you're not sick, um, when you're experiencing pain, or when you're going through injury. Um, you're not sick. This is a perfectly normal thing that we all experience. And so I don't want you to feel like you're being cleaved off to the side, to be treated, um, like like a patient. I want people to be involved. Like, we have people in our classes that'll be in boots, non-weight bearing, working with everybody else. And so that's fun to see when you
Mhm.
see somebody, use a knee crutch and go across, and they're doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, but they're recovering actively with everybody. They're not like sequestered, as a patient. So I think there is some real value for folks to realize that that's an actuality. It's not just semantics. It's real. Yeah, it's not just a case of switching some things around. When you can realize that, um, we all go through those things, and we can go through them together, it's helpful. Yeah, to stay within your community, stay recovering actively. Uh, like, I know when a few years ago, when Rob was hurt, he went through an injury that looked like it could be a career-ending injury, um, and he stayed coming to the gym. He was non-weight bearing. I have videos of him being so out of breath, from just using upper extremities, where he would just but it was such a valuable thing for him to stay
Mhm.
engaged, and that's the way it is for all of us. You get to stay being an athlete and being engaged in those how we live.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's a big of the unpacking.
Yeah, so there's like this athletes are used to operating in two distinct modes with a
Mhm.
partition between them. It's like when I'm not experiencing unusual pain, I'm an athlete and I'm training. When I am experiencing unusual pain, I'm a patient and I'm in treatment.
Mhm.
You're trying to explode, remove that partition and say, no,
Mhm.
it's like you're always an athlete, you're always training. It's just like if pain is present, there might be certain tools that you need to temporarily remove from your
Mhm.
training toolkit. There might be certain other tools you need to bring
Yeah.
into play, but it's always the same process. It's
Mhm.
just like
Yep.
you're tending a garden.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah, you're not fixing. So you're caring for, you're tending to. I like to tell folks, if you're looking for an end to this process, you're going to be really frustrated, uh, and you're going to maybe live in a state of frustration. But if you realize that it's a constant if then scenario, it's not an either or, meaning if you have pain, you're not then sick. And then if you don't have pain, you're then healthy. That's just not how it works.
Right.
So you just make moves and make judgments off of that experience you're living with, and through, and then you get to stay, much more engaged. So, and we honestly, we made that up. We made up the difference, that there is a
Right.
difference.
Yes.
So it's a fabricated thing, really.
Yeah.
So, in a lot of ways, I don't think it's good for us.
Yeah. Yeah. We cite some of that research in the book, like looking at obviously, I mean, we're living in the year 2023. We're all in the same place, but there has been research looking at Aboriginal communities that have been less touched by
Western.
yeah, Western influences, the medicalization of pain, and like a lot has been learned about how everyone used to deal with pain,
Uh
and
huh.
like all of those concepts are absent. Like
Yeah.
low back pain, the most common health complaint.
Yep.
Like they have it too. They just don't think of it as an injury
Yeah.
or anything different from being hungry or tired
Yeah.
or whatever. Yeah. Um, yeah. So can you talk a little bit about I mean kind of I mean for me like the thing that like forget about athletes that just most people don't know is like if you just make a list of all the things you can do to try to address pain and then rank them in order of efficacy. I mean,
Hmm.
everything from exercise to drugs,
Yep.
to grinning and bearing it or whatever. Like, what is most efficacious?
Exercise.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is kind of amazing.
And
Mm,
how deep and solid is the science proving that motion is lotion in that regard?
yeah. Yeah. Strong. Yeah. Strong evidence, which you rarely see something that falls with the heading of strong evidence. Usually it's needs further review. you know,
Yeah.
but exercise is the only thing that really has good evidence behind it for helping. But and the other thing is some people have underlying conditions that, um, like I had, for whatever reason, in the last 4 weeks, I've had three runners that we work with, that are elite runners, ultra runners, and have been diagnosed with RA. And we know that, okay, that is probably going to have some influence on your pain experiences. So knowing that some people are just going to experience pain, mm, more often is helpful, but because they don't have to stop what they're doing, we can
Right.
just adjust,
Right.
you know, yeah, to what they're living with at that time. So rather than being sick, being well, and being sick and being well, and living on the pendulum, you know, of patient and well person. So yeah, and so it's been really helpful for those people in the last couple of weeks to have these conversations. You know, it brought some understanding
Yep.
to some things, um, and yeah. So sometimes people are going to have more pain than other people, and they can still they having this knowledge will help.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just not the cut and dry thing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, obviously, like what you do at Paragon is a little bit different. Like, as a hands-on coach, is a little bit different than what you can do as the author of a book.
Mhm.
But we really tried to, like, you know, make the book do as much for athletes kind of in that mediated fashion as you do
Yep.
face to face in your facility. Um, Can you say a little bit about the that sort of like 3-step process? Again, you probably, like, when you're in the gym, you might not necessarily think about this is phase one, this is phase two,
Right.
but like it is different. Like, so it's like, we break it up into discrete phases,
Yep.
which is like legitimate.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think that's like, I imagine that the thing that athletes are going to look for, it's like this, that we've talked about this, like the what's in it for me question. Like when they
Hmm.
pick up this book, like, how's this going to help me?
Hmm.
I'm an athlete. I want to get faster.
Yeah. Well, faster, like you're going to spend more time, less time missing training, missing what your activity is,
Right.
for one thing.
But I mean, what does the process look like? Let's just say, like, I've got, some of my injuries, like a pretty significant and recurrent, like, groin tendon type of thing.
Yep.
It's like, it compromised my ability to do stuff
Uh-huh.
quite a bit.
Yeah.
And like, okay, I come to you and I'm like, I'm a runner, love to run. I've got big ambitions, can't run a step right
Yeah.
now without, like, and I have a high pain tolerance.
Right.
Like, I can't run a step without unacceptable levels of pain. What does the process look like from, like, going from there to PRing in the marathon?
The process is we try to shop around for some exercises, meaning we'll like try some different movements, exercises that a lot of times just loading graded exposure is the fancy term. So slowly putting load to the tissue that is kind of provoked, easily provoked. So we're just gently working back. Sometimes you have to like move to a different, like ask that area to just do some different work for a second, and then gently start moving back into the area that is easily provoked. So, like if you did have, like something that was osteitis pubis type symptoms, then slowly loading that with what's the adductor exercises,
Mm-hmm.
um, is typically a way forward. And it's that general process, accounting for all those other lifestyle influences and biopsychosocial influences, and just trying to ask that tissue to do what it's supposed to do, without getting upset, is essentially the thing. The funny thing is people tend to think, oh, it's getting stronger and that's why the pain's getting better, but that's really not how it works at all. Like tissue takes time to change. And it's really funny because sometimes people will leave the shop and they'll say, oh, it feels much better. And I'm like, well, the tissue clearly didn't change.
Right.
Like, um, so it just shows how changeable pain is. And there are so many ways to come at it to help. But typically, loading the tissue with the issue, as they say, is
Mm-hmm.
a piece of that
Right.
for most people. It's always a little different for every person, but usually loading the tissue that's easily provoked is a part of the process. So like Achilles, like I had a lady that I worked with 2 years ago, and she, um, a lot of the folks that I work with have been patients for so many years, and she was afraid of her knees, wearing out her knees, and she wanted to ski. And I said, well, the curious thing is that if you went to see somebody for a knee that hurt, like you have,
Mm-hmm.
they would most likely ask you to load that tissue. And in my mind, skiing would be one of the best ways to load that tissue. And then, like 7 days later, I got a video of her bombing down the slope. Yeah, and it had totally changed the context of her experience, which is huge. That's one of the biggest things that helps, changing contextual changes to your pain experiences. So, yeah.
This is a little bit of an unfair question,
Okay.
but because you're a humble man, but I mean, one of the things that I think is like compelling about the book we've written is like the success stories.
Yeah.
Where like things that look, and I've experienced these for myself. The things that look kind of miraculous, like where it's like looking really hopeless for an athlete,
Right.
and then lo and behold,
Yeah.
they come back all the way, and in many cases are better than ever. And this is like, like, 'cause there aren't many people who do what you do. Like, I mean, you're basically a strength and conditioning
Yeah.
coach who has an expertise in helping athletes who are experiencing pain,
Yep.
and word's gotten out,
Yeah.
and so you have all these people who like are kind of desperate and who have struck out with the orthopedists and the sports medicine physicians and the physical therapists
Hmm.
and the weirdo ancillary types of
Yeah.
folks, and they come to you and they're like, well, I got nothing to lose.
Right.
And then you've had your failures too, but a
Yep.
lot of like really remarkable successes. Like, why is that sort of like, I mean, why is almost every athlete really never a lost cause? Like, how can everyone come back from almost everything?
Yeah. Uh, that probably goes back to seeing what I saw as a kid. Because uh, I just saw my dad bounce back from so much. Like all 7 cervicals broken, racing a few months later, and winning races again. And so I think you interviewed me for the comeback quotient.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember you saying, "Do you have any comeback stories?" And I was like, "I live on the comeback story. I was brought up in the comeback story."
Right.
And it's true. Like we were
Mm-hmm.
constantly living the cycle of a comeback,
Mm-hmm.
constantly, um, which I didn't realize the value of that.
Right.
My dad would take the most horrendous crashes. This is not an exaggeration. He would come into the house with dirt ground into his teeth, uh, and his face sort of scruffed up, and he would sit down. This is before breakfast. I remember this. He did some work. He was working horses around the racetrack. We had a racetrack at our farm, and this is what he had to say about his crash. My shoulder didn't feel very good, and it's feeling better now. Like crashing at 40 miles an hour is what helped his shoulder into the dirt. And so he just had this way of like flipping,
Right.
flipping stories. And I think that had a huge impact on me without realizing it. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I just always am like, now we can get better from this. So, yeah. And my dad, even with his injury he had at 72, with a traumatic brain injury, he was just sort of written off as dead. Um, and amazingly, like, came back from a incredibly traumatic brain injury uh, at 72 years old, where, most folks just thought this guy will be gone in 6 months, and we're 11 years out now, and he's still happy and going at it. Yeah. So I think that's probably the why I'm always like, now we can do this.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, shoot, there's so much more. I mean, this has been quite a saga. It's just that you didn't know when, because you reached out to me, by the way, in
Yeah.
January 2020, and that was right before I got COVID, and then long COVID, and then like this book should have been in readers' hands before now,
Yeah.
but it is coming December 2023 for those of you in the future or the present. And yeah, I just think I'm stoked because like these experiences are universal. And like the kind of help that you offer is not widely available
No,
to
sadly.
athletes, and like we're trying to change that. So it's like, yeah, it's one book, but it's also a movement. Honestly,
Truly.
it's like we're trying to create a paradigm shift,
Yep.
to get back to a better place. So yeah, probably we'll have to have you back because like we didn't get too much into the psychosocial part of
Yeah.
pain, which is gigantic and something that like I know from my personal experience that is huge as well. Like it's like an everything matters
Yeah.
type of thing. But yeah, I'm so glad that I went to Rob Krar's camp and got to meet you and had that mind-blowing experience, and that we've remained connected and created this book together.
Yeah. I'm super thankful as well. Yeah.
Yes. So that's it for, we've got a quiche on the way, and some potatoes and salad, and Nibley is like a hummus, and it's, you guys are missing out, but whatever, that's why you got to come to Dream Run Camp. You could partake if you came. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you. Yeah.
Over and out.